Hello friends, and welcome back to the home office. Now the first thing you'll notice, of course, is that my partner in crime, Chelsea, is not by my side as she normally would be. Regrettably, she has a prior engagement, so she could not join me here today, but we did want to get this video out to you as soon as possible because it does include some pretty substantial cruising news that we're all very excited about. It's not quite the news we've all been waiting for, but I do believe it's about as close as we could get without them actually coming out and saying that cruises have resumed sailing from the United States of America. So we are knocking on the door. Now, what is this news that I'm talking about? Well, it was announced today, first released by USA Today, that the CDC, Center for Disease Control, had sent a letter to the cruise industry. And this letter contained some very important updates, but all of these updates were centered around the idea of cruises resuming from the United States in mid-July. If you've followed us, you know we've been talking about that for quite a while. I've been speaking to clients about this. We've been telling you, the viewers, about this. That July, that was the month we kept hearing. July. And that is still definitely the target date. So some verbiage from the CDC themselves now backing that up and saying that that is the ultimate goal, that we can have some resumption of cruising throughout the industry here in the United States by mid-July. Now, there's some more to come with that. There's some more details surrounding that. So what is this letter? The letter was written by the CDC's head of maritime unit, Amy Trefiletti. And the quote reads, "We acknowledge that cruising will never be a zero-risk activity, and that the goal of the CSO," that's the conditional sail order, the conditional sail order's phased approach is to resume passenger operations in a way that mitigates the risk of COVID-19 transmission on board cruise ships and across port communities. So right there off the bat, we have something pretty big. That's pretty substantial because a lot of people have felt like the CDC has been unfair, that they've been unjust in their treatment of cruises and barring cruising from taking place here in the United States, and that they were taking a zero-risk approach, that we had to have no potential COVID cases before we would resume cruising. Now the CDC themselves directly saying that's not the case. We understand that's not realistic. We want to have a safe approach. We want to have a realistic approach. And that means that we're trying to mitigate the risk as much as possible rather than have a complete absence of risk. So that's huge right off the bat. Very important that they recognize that. They're now working with the cruise lines even more so than they had been. And so you remember our last big update was when the CDC announced that we were moving from phase 1 to phase 2A of the conditional sail order. And a lot of people were pretty upset when that happened because they felt like it wasn't substantial news, that the CDC was kind of just drawing things out. They weren't providing proper details. The cruise lines themselves felt like this. It wasn't really specific enough instruction for them to move forward at the pace that they felt was necessary. You heard leaders of the different cruise lines calling the process antiquated, saying that the need for test cruises was obsolete now because there has been cruising in other parts of the world here in the era of COVID-19, and they've been doing it safely, they've been doing it responsibly. So the good news is, and not only is the CDC now saying we're changing our approach to this, but they actually gave 5 key points of emphasis of how they're basically revamping that prior instruction in phase 2A, and they're giving more specific details. So I'm going to read some of those off here. Number 1, ships can bypass the required simulated test voyages. What? Yes, we've been hearing about that. Like I just mentioned, the cruise line said that's so old, it's antiquated, we don't need to do test cruises. We've been doing that. The CDC says they can now bypass those and jump to sailings with paying passengers if, this is important, 98% of the crew and 95% of passengers are fully vaccinated. Of course, we've been covering this fully vaccinated, meaning you've either had the 1 dose of the Johnson & Johnson, both doses of the Pfizer Moderna vaccines, and then 2 weeks have passed since your final dose. So if they hit those numbers, they can resume sailing. They don't even need to do a test cruise. They can sail under those parameters. That's huge. Huge news. So that's number 1. Number 2, CDC will review and respond to applications from cruise lines for simulated voyages within 5 days a review that was previously expected to take 60 days. That's right. So now a process from if you don't have those vaccinated numbers, if you're needing to do simulated test cruises or you need to submit these approvals to the CDC, the process was going to take about 2 months and it will now take less than a week. So again, just light speed, huge change from the CDC. This is a massive pivot. Number 3, CDC will update its testing and quarantine requirements for passengers and crew on sailings with paying passengers to align with the CDC's guidance for fully vaccinated people. For example, instead of taking a PCR lab test ahead of boarding, vaccinated passengers can take a rapid antigen test upon embarkation. That's on the testing side of things. I'm going to skip ahead to point number 5 that was clarified because it's the one, again, that kind of ties in with that last one about quarantining, which is that the CDC has clarified guidance on quarantine guidelines for passengers who may be exposed to or contract COVID-19. For example, local passengers may be able to drive home, and passengers who have traveled by air to cruise may quarantine in a hotel. So again, you're not having to worry about being stuck out at sea. You will be permitted to disembark. And then the final point, which is number 4 here, CDC has clarified that cruise ship operators may enter into a multi-port agreement rather than a single port agreement as long as all port and local authorities sign the agreement. So I think what it means is instead of saying like you have to have this one port that agrees to provide medical care, take care of you, provide supplies, you can do multiple ports instead, but they all have to agree to it, of course, and be able to provide those things. So those are the 5 points that they've added specific clarification to. I think they're all important, they're all great, some clearly bigger than others, and then the kind of the clause at the end that you can bypass the simulated test voyages and go straight to revenue sailings, which are just standard, the regular cruise sailings that we all know and love. The cruise ships can go straight into those if they can prove and sign a waiver and clause and all that claiming of all those things that 98% or more of their crew is fully vaccinated, 95% or more of the passengers are fully vaccinated. Now, I know that brings up questions for a lot of people. Some people are not fully vaccinated. They will not be able to be fully vaccinated, especially with children. That was one specific thing. Richard Fain and Michael Bailey, both from Royal Caribbean, the higher-ups, they've both spoken on this and actually talked about children specifically, how this would affect them. Mr. Bailey says that he believes the age restriction for kids will soon be lowered. It's currently 16. They think it will drop to 12 in the coming weeks. And then they said, so what about kids, 11 and under? At this time, apparently there's not really an answer for that. Royal Caribbean, Michael Bailey did share that 0 to 11 makes up a very small percentage of their customer base. But obviously that would affect people who want to travel, who want to cruise as a family. I would say at least in the upstart of things that you would maybe need to make alternative arrangements if you do have younger ones. Maybe, if you want to travel without them or just plan on going at another time, because it seems like at this point it's unlikely that they will be able to go in that age range. But again, that is a little bit of speculation, a little bit of projecting. We don't know for sure. It's just that's kind of how that's laying out right now. So a couple other points specifically from Royal Caribbean, because you guys know that's the one that we sail the most as well as sell the most. So that's the one that we're usually talking about. And both Richard Fain and Michael Bailey said they were extremely encouraged by this update from the CDC, feeling very good about starting in July, mid-July, although they did want to point out it could be possible to restart cruising by mid-July. This is a quote from Richard Fain, by the way. Quote, "It could be possible to restart cruising by mid-July. I would also emphasize that the restart does not mean that we will immediately go into full operation, fully operational. We are hopeful about restarting. That restart will be gradual and deliberate." So we've been telling you this the whole time. They're not going to just say, okay, go and open the floodgates and every single ship is sailing exactly as it was intended to. That's not going to happen. They're going to take a slower, phased-in approach to this. We don't have any more particular details on that. I know people are wondering, which ships does that mean? Which ports does it mean? Honestly, we just don't know. We're just going to have to wait on more information for that aspect. But like we've said, if you can just remain adaptable, remain flexible, that will suit you well in the upcoming months. The goal, though, obviously, is to get cruising restarted here in the United States by mid-July, and it sounds like that's a very strong possibility. One thing I do want to emphasize very, very much though, as Royal Caribbean has said from the beginning, other cruise lines have echoed this sentiment, is that this is going to be a phased-in approach. So, even if being fully vaccinated is a requirement at the start of the resumption of cruising in the United States, that may not be a permanent thing. I would guess it likely not to be a permanent thing. You're going to see all kinds of adjustments along the way. When we first start up, masks will probably be a requirement, at least indoors. That will change at some point. If for whatever reason you are not going to be fully vaccinated and you want to go on a cruise, don't feel too put out. It's something that will probably change at some point. I've seen a lot of people voicing their frustration or their concerns about requiring a vaccine to sail and how that's going to leave them out in the cold. Fret not, though. I think that's going to be a very temporary thing. You know, they'll do it as long as they see fit. I mean, we're in a pandemic. They need to be safe. They need to be responsible. So as long as they see fit, that could be a requirement. I don't think it's something that's going to be permanent. And we don't know how long it's going to go. So in summary, some very, very good news today. It's great to hear the CDC mirroring our goal for a July restart, the cruise line's goal for a July restart. They are now saying that themselves specifically, and then giving those enhanced specifications, those clearer guidelines about what the cruise lines need to do to make that a reality. So, fingers crossed, there's still a lot of work to do. We still need to make sure everything's going in the right direction, but things are really, really looking up for a July restart of cruising from the United States. Thank you for joining me today. Sorry that Chelsea couldn't be here. She'll be back for the next one, of course, but we did want to get this news out to you as soon as possible. It's such great news, and we wanted everyone to be happy, feeling the good vibes, start thinking about cruising, start planning your ideas and your vacations, and hey, of course, we're travel agents. We'd love to make it happen for you. Feel free to reach out via that travel agent information you can find in the description of this video. We'd love to hear from you, and we definitely would love to help you all get back to cruising. That's what it's all about. We're signing off from this good news. Happy travels!